Thanks for agreeing to do the interview. Now your story in many ways is quite extraordinary. But just to start with, can you give us a bit of background on how you came to care for your dad and what that actually involved?
Absolutely. Well, it's lovely to talk to you today, Matt. So my dad had vascular dementia for 19 years. It began when I was around 12 years old. He went 10 years without a diagnosis and then spent the last 9 years of his life in 3 different care homes. So I really kind of fell into caring for my dad quite unexpectedly, and for many years actually would never have identified myself as a carer at all, in common with most people who are family carers.
12 years old, I mean, that's very young to start caring for your dad. Did it make you feel any different from other people when you were growing up, like your peers and your school friends? Did they have a similar kind of experience, or did they know that you were a carer at all?
No, and actually because I didn't identify myself as a carer, we never really had that conversation at all. It was only really once Dad was diagnosed that suddenly everything that had gone on before made sense. And I actually thought to myself, well, do you know what? Yeah, all those years I actually was doing more and more for Dad without really realising it. None of my friends had the same experience. So I never really considered myself a carer, and so therefore I just never really had those conversations.
What about carers in general that you've come across through your experience, through all the work, the advocacy work that you do? Do you feel that carers, do you get the feeling that do they tell you they get isolated or lonely?
Absolutely, yeah. I think people have a myriad of different caring experiences. So we have very young carers all the way through to carers who are in their sort of 80s and 90s. And I think there is a very common theme across the generations, and no matter what your caring circumstance, that generally people do feel very isolated. They don't feel very well supported. They don't feel very well understood. And that leads to a real sort of cut-off from society, which obviously can have serious implications for the person's sort of mental health and their ability to continue as a carer long term.
I've heard you mention before that you made a conscious decision to prioritise your father's care. Was that because you felt he wasn't receiving enough support from outside sources, or was it just a natural thing for you to do you think?
It was very much because Dad had been diagnosed with a terminal condition. You know, in the first discussion with the doctor and with the research we did afterwards, it was clear, you know, Dad didn't have years and years ahead of him. He had a life-limiting condition. So for me, it was about spending time with my dad while I had time with my dad, and making the time that I had with him as good as it could possibly be for both of us. Because I think I wanted to make some memories that would be something nice to look back on. And I think we managed to do that in difficult circumstances, but I feel generally we managed to do that.
What do you think it meant to your dad, you caring for him?
I hope it was something that he liked. I hope it was. I mean, Dad lost a lot of his communication ability. For the last few years of his life, he couldn't really have a conversation, maybe 1 or 2 words. But we would sing a song together, and that was lovely. I think Dad was a very private person. He was a very family-orientated person. So for him, I think living in a communal environment would have been quite challenging. So I think the involvement of the people that he knew and loved the most was really, really important to him. So for that, I'm glad that we were able to do that for him.
In May 2012, you launched D for Dementia. Can you explain a little bit how that came about?
OK, so after my dad passed away, as you say, I began the blog, and it was really to share some of our more positive experiences of my dad's life with dementia. I just wanted to share positive experiences to help other families going through the same situation that we found ourselves in. So, right. For example, my most read blog post on D for Dementia by a long margin is the one I wrote on swallowing problems. It's something my dad lived with the last 4 years of his life. It's a topic that carers, family carers and professionals in health and social care know very little about. People are not told about it. And even now I get emails from around the world. People have found that particular blog post. I remember a gentleman contacting me who was caring for his father living in Mexico. And he said, I have absolutely no idea what to do. My dad chokes on everything. What do I do? How do I find the support that I need? Do
you feel your experiences caring for your father gave you kind of a purpose in life, and hence you were able to sort of start the blog and it gave you some ideas as to what you wanted to do in life?
It did. I mean, I think it was partly my own personal experiences and partly the fact that dementia had suddenly come into significant focus. I think the two kind of came together and made me think, OK, maybe there's something that I can do here. And there's nothing I love more than sort of the consultancy work that I do, working with care providers, actually on the front line with the people that they're caring for and supporting, actually really making a difference to the practice of the staff, the way they work with families, the whole sphere of what they do, really trying to improve that.
Going back to the swallowing issues that your father had, do you think you're in a position to offer a really unique perspective?
I think the position we found ourselves in was having to find practical solutions to the problems that my dad had. So we spent a lot of time with him. We tried a lot of different things, and maybe through our own good fortune, as it were, we discovered things that really worked. So, for example, really struggled with drinks and with thickening drinks. My dad loved a cup of tea, but you try thickening tea, it's a nightmare. But thickening smoothies works brilliantly. And when a person can't swallow very well and their nutritional intake is declining, that is at least one way of getting some fresh fruit into them. So it was more trial and error in a sense, but nonetheless, over 4 years, that's a lot of trial and error. That's a lot of learning. That's a lot of observation and a lot of reflection. So from that perspective, given the amount of time that carers actually spend with their loved one, if you know what you're doing and you're consciously aware of trying to sort of, in a sense, problem solve, yes, you can come up with a whole array of information that you can pass on to professionals who potentially look quite surprised that nobody's ever actually tried this. I mean, when my dad was in hospital, we would actually take bottles of smoothie in for him just because he needed to drink. And the staff had never even thought of that. So I think there is a lot that carers can contribute, and I think that goes back to the point about actually needing to work with family carers in every aspect. So when you're devising care plans, when you're thinking about how you're caring for the person, to actually involve that carer expertise, because it's absolutely invaluable.
Do you think carers should be seen as a professional vocation, even if they're not sort of professional as in trained? Because ultimately you are the experts.
Expert by experience, yeah, that's
Correct.
what they call us. You know what, yeah, we are. But I think the difficulty with seeing it as a profession is obviously there's an element of job in that. I'm not sure carers are necessarily seeking a formal role and the rights and responsibilities that come alongside that. I think more than anything, they want someone to walk alongside them in their own unique journey and to respond to what they need, because everybody is different and everyone needs something different.
Do you think carers become natural problem solvers?
I think to a certain extent you have to, because quite often you've got a whole set of problems and nobody's there to help and support you. I think when the caring role ends, as it does for a lot of people, through various circumstances, including if the person passes away, if you are someone who's developed a really strong problem-solving skill set, you're a huge asset. If you want to then, if a working age where you want to go and work in health or social care, you could potentially be a massive asset, because problem-solving skills is something that I find that professional staff often struggle with a lot. I don't think it's something you can necessarily train and educate someone into. What has very much happened for me is that everything I learned from caring for my dad, I've transferred into the work I do now. So initially through the blogs, which are very practical in terms of their approach and the advice and information that they give people. But definitely now very much in the work I do with consultancy clients. So whether it's through working with Department of Health or the Care Quality Commission, through to working with private care providers.
So clearly, caring isn't seen as a professional vocation in many respects. How do we value carers?
I think the number one way to value carers is actually to ask them what they want and to deliver that. I think it's to recognise the uniqueness of individual carers. There is no one size fits all. You could plough a fortune into respite and you will find that some people just aren't looking for that particular respite solution. They're looking for something else. They might be looking for a befriending solution, a sitting solution. They might be wanting some sort of daycare provision. Sometimes people want support as a family, and that will mean that we have to have a myriad of different solutions, and we have to be very flexible about what we offer people, appreciating that they are absolutely individual in their own right, and that their need to a family life and what that entails needs to be supported.
You seem to have found a very happy place now, Beth, and your desire and your encouragement to help and to care for people is quite astonishing and inspirational. I think your father would be incredibly proud of you.
Thank you.